When we look at the creation of woman in the book of Genesis, there is something sacred, something deliberate, something that speaks volumes even in silence. God did not make woman from the ground like he did with Adam. He didn't scoop dust, breathe life into it, and form her the same way. No, he caused Adam to sleep, reached into his side, and took a rib. A rib. That detail isn't just anatomy, it's divine architecture. God could have taken any part, but he chose a rib, something close to the heart, protected under the arm, not from the head to rule over him, not from the feet to be trampled under him, but from the side, to walk with him, to stand beside him, to be his equal and his strength. That choice tells us everything about how God sees women. It was not random, it was not mechanical, it was intentional. This kind of intention reveals the deep care and value God placed in her design. Before she even had a name, she had worth. Before she said a single word, she carried purpose. God made her in his image, just like Adam, and yet he did something different with her. He made her through relationship. Adam needed her, not just for company, but for completion. It wasn't good for man to be alone. So God created woman as the answer to that need, not as a solution to a problem, but as a completion to a purpose. The beauty here is that she was made with destiny wrapped into her being. God formed her not as a copy, but as a complement, equal, unique, and necessary. Think about the symbolism of the rib. The rib protects the lungs and the heart, organs essential to life. In the same way, a woman is often the protector of life itself. She carries children, she nurtures families, she breathes emotional and spiritual vitality into relationships. There is a reason God designed her to be a life bearer, not just biologically, but spiritually. She brings life to everything she touches. That's not coincidence. That's craftsmanship. When God makes something, he doesn't do it halfway. He doesn't create by mistake. Everything in creation had a rhythm, a purpose, a function. And yet, after everything else was made, the stars, the seas, the animals, even man, he looked and said something was still not complete. That final act, the creation of woman, was the finishing stroke, the crown of creation. That means something. That means woman wasn't just added in, she was intended from the beginning, woven into the very story of humanity as essential, as glorious, as deeply and divinely necessary. When a builder finishes a house, he puts the crown molding last. Not because it's least important, but because it's what completes the masterpiece. That's what woman is. She is the completion of creation's beauty. She brings balance to the garden, depth to the soul, and reflection to God's image on earth. That's not about hierarchy, that's about harmony. God didn't just give her life, he gave her significance, authority, dignity. Her design was the result of divine thought, not divine filler. The world often treats women as if their value is conditional, based on roles or appearance or utility. But God says something different. God's design says your value is embedded in you because of how you were formed. From the beginning, you were shaped with care. Every curve, every instinct, every strength designed. And it wasn't hurried. God caused Adam to sleep. That sleep, that pause says something. It says this creation needed stillness. It required space. It wasn't something to be done while distracted. It needed sacred focus. Woman was made in a moment of peace, carved from connection, born in stillness. That is divine design. That is why she is not a mistake, not a shadow, not a leftover. She is not an afterthought. She is the intention of a God who doesn't miss details, who doesn't waste creation, who doesn't do anything without meaning. And when she was made, God didn't just call her good. He called the whole creation very good. That shift in tone, that upgrade in declaration, happened only after she came into being. So if you ever doubt your value, your place, your identity, remember this: you were not formed in haste. You were formed in love. You are the product of holy thought. You are a result of divine design. When we speak of women reflecting God's nature, we are touching something sacred, something deeply spiritual. It's not just about roles or tasks or appearances, it's about essence. At the core of every woman is a divine fingerprint, an imprint of the Creator that reveals who He is through who she is. God, who is infinite and beyond full human understanding, chose to reveal parts of His heart through the very nature of women. It's not that God is male or female. He transcends gender. But when he made humanity in his image, he made them male and female. That means both man and woman carry a piece of the divine. And the piece that woman carries is something special, something vital, something the world could never replace or manufacture. She reflects his patience, his mercy, his nurturing spirit, his fierce protection, his quiet strength, and his unshakable love. When you look into the eyes of a woman who has endured pain, betrayal, disappointment, and yet still chooses to love, to give, to believe, that is not weakness. That is divinity on display. That is what God's heart looks like. It is long-suffering, it is steadfast, it is full of grace. In every act of sacrificial love a mother gives, in every moment of empathy a sister shares, in every quiet prayer a wife lifts up in the night, there you see God's tenderness revealed. Women have a way of holding broken things and making them whole, of seeing the invisible and valuing it, of pouring strength into others when their own strength is running dry. That doesn't come from culture, that doesn't come from society, that comes from the Spirit of the living God, breathing through her character. The world tends to measure strength by noise, by force, by dominance. But God's strength often moves in silence, in perseverance, in resilience. A woman's strength is not loud, but it is powerful. It doesn't break doors down. It holds doors open. It doesn't boast, it builds. That's why God's nature is seen so clearly in her. He is not only the God who parts seas and shakes mountains. He is the God who comforts the hurting, who weeps with the grieving, who whispers in the silence. And so often, that's the nature women carry. They are the voice of comfort, the arms of healing, the presence of safety. That is not soft, that is sacred. That is not fratable. That is not lesser. That is godlike. Think about the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. These are the very characteristics of God, and they are often embodied most clearly in the lives of faithful, Spirit-led women. That's no accident. That's design. That's reflection. That's God choosing to show parts of himself not through power and position, but through humility, through service, through inner beauty. There is a divine beauty in a woman who walks in her God-given identity, not striving, not proving, just being. Because in being who she truly is, she points back to the one who made her. She becomes a mirror of his love, his wisdom, his justice, his grace. And when you see a woman pray with tears in her eyes and faith in her heart, you see the persistence of God. When you see a woman fight for her family, for her children, for her community, you see the protector side of God. When you hear a woman speak life into a discouraged soul, you hear the voice of the Comforter. This is not fiction. This is not theory. This is real, and it is holy. So the next time you look at a woman and see only what the world tells you to see, step back. Look again. Look deeper. Because she may be carrying more of heaven than you think. She may be showing you what God is like without ever saying a word. She may be revealing the invisible nature of God through every step she takes, every burden she carries, every act of love she gives, without even knowing it, without trying to be anything other than who God made her to. A woman is not just a vessel for life. She is a bearer of it in every form, and that power is not limited to biology. When God chose to place the future of humanity within the womb of a woman, he made a declaration about trust, about capability, about divine partnership. He said, "This is where life begins. This is where I will do my work." From the very beginning, the ability to nurture, to develop, to carry potential until it's ready to breathe, was placed inside her. That is not a coincidence. And it's not merely physical, it is spiritual. It is eternal. It is powerful beyond words. Women bring life wherever they go, not just in birth, but in spirit, in vision, in hope. They carry dreams inside their hearts the same way they carry children inside their bodies. They carry burdens for others without being asked. They carry stories, wisdom, healing. They nurture what others forget to water. That's not just kindness, that's divine capacity. God could have chosen any means for life to continue, but he chose woman. And even after the fall, even when pain was introduced into her story, he didn't strip that power away. He allowed her to still carry the future. That speaks to something unshakable in her spirit. She may bend under the weight, but she does not break. And even when she is broken, she somehow still finds a way to hold others together. She weaves peace into chaos. She creates beauty from mess. She speaks calm into storms, not because she's never known struggle, but because she's lived through it and chose not to let it make her bitter. That power to build when everything is falling apart, that is life-bearing power. That is creation power. That is God's breath moving through her words and actions. When you see a woman raise children, you're watching more than parenting. You're witnessing stewardship of destiny. She's not just feeding mouths, she's feeding minds, souls, identities. She's shaping futures one word at a time, one sacrifice at a time, one prayer at a time. And not every woman is a mother in the biological sense, but many are mothers in spirit. They mentor, guide, protect, speak life over the next generation. They water seeds planted by God Himself. They may not get applause, they may not be noticed, but heaven sees them, and heaven honors them. Because in every act of nurturing, they are doing what God does for us all, bringing light to dark places, speaking hope over the forgotten, covering wounds with gentle hands. Even in leadership, even in business, in education, in ministry, wherever a woman walks, she brings life. She enters a space and something changes. It may not be loud, it may not be obvious, but over time, things begin to grow around her. Teams start to thrive, people start to believe again. That's not strategy, that's her spiritual DNA at work. She doesn't just execute plans, she sees potential. She doesn't just manage, she multiplies. What she touches, she doesn't just use, she cultivates. That's life-bearing. That's how God works. And He placed that nature deep inside her from the beginning. The world often teaches that power is about control, but a woman's power is about cultivation. It's about building others even when no one builds her. It's about choosing to love even when she has every reason to walk away. It's about seeing what's not yet and believing in what can be. This kind of faith, this kind of vision, this kind of strength, it mirrors God's own heart. It's the same heart that saw the void and spoke creation. The same heart that took dust and shaped a man. The same heart that took a rib and shaped a woman. She carries that heart in how she lives, how she leads, how she loves. And even in silence, even in exhaustion, she brings life where there was none. Again and again, without needing applause or recognition or permission, simply because that's who she is, and who she was created to be by the hands of the Almighty, who trusted her with the power to nurture life in every form, in every space, through every season, by the design that only He could give, and only she could. Resilience in a woman is not something she wears like armor for show. It is something that's been forged in silence, through storms, through moments no one else sees. It is the quiet rising after being knocked down. It is the decision to keep giving, keep showing up, keep believing even when the world gives her every reason not to. This resilience is not learned from ease. It is shaped by pain, by heartbreak, by injustice. And still she rises, not because she's never been hurt, but because she refuses to let that hurt define who she is. There is something divine about that kind of strength, something eternal, because it echoes the heart of God, who Himself has been rejected, wounded, forgotten, and still keeps loving, still keeps reaching. That is the resilience we see in women every single day. She endures not for applause, but because she must, because someone is depending on her, because someone needs her, because the world has told her to sit down, and she knows she was made to stand. And she stands not just for herself, but for others, for her children, for her sisters, for the voiceless. This is not weakness. This is not fragility. This is strength that outlasts storms. This is the strength to cry and keep moving, to feel and still act, to be wounded and still choose to love. That kind of resilience is rare, but in women, it is common, because God put it there. He planted it deep, like a root that can't be pulled out. And when drought comes, when the winds blow, that root holds. She bends, but she does not fall. She breaks, but she does not shatter. That is not her own doing. That is God in her. Think of all the times a woman has been told she is too emotional, too soft, too much. What the world calls weakness, God calls reflection. The very things that make her feel deeply, that make her care deeply, are the very things that give her the power to keep going when others stop. Emotion is not a flaw, it's fuel. It allows her to carry not only her own pain, but the pain of others, and she does, every day, quietly, without complaining, without demanding recognition. That is not natural. That is supernatural. And it is resilience not born from pride, but from love. History shows us the strength of women who changed nations, raised generations, stood at gravesides, held families together with nothing but prayer and grit. These stories are not rare, they are everywhere, and yet too often overlooked. But God never overlooks them. God sees, God knows, God honors. Because He made her this way, not so she could be used up by the world, but so she could transform it. Through her endurance, through her faith, through her refusal to let darkness win. That is the strength of a woman in the image of God. She can hold joy and sorrow in the same breath. She can serve while bleeding. She can encourage while grieving. This is not a performance. This is the reality of countless women walking this earth with invisible crowns, unseen scars, and unwavering faith. The world may not understand it, but heaven celebrates it. Because when she stands back up, when she wipes her tears and still smiles, when she carries burdens that should have crushed her and still walks in grace, she is showing the power of divine resilience. Not the resilience of pride or self-sufficiency, but of surrender, of faith, of knowing she is not alone, that God is in her, that He walks with her, that He is her source when the world runs dry. And so she rises not just once, but again and again, not because she wants to be strong, but because she knows she was created for more than survival. She was created to overcome, to outlast, to shine through every shadow with a strength that does not come from this world, but from the God who placed eternity inside her and called her to stand, even when no one else could see the weight she was carrying, even when no one else believed she would make it, even when everything around her said she should give up. Yet somehow, by grace, she keeps walking, keeps building, keeps hoping, and keeps choosing love over fear, strength over bitterness, and faith over despair, with a resilience that speaks of the God who never the world is loud with labels. It tells women what they should be, how they should act, what they should look like, what they should desire. From the time she is a little girl, she is handed definitions that have nothing to do with truth. Definitions based on trends, on culture, on someone else's comfort. She is told that her value comes from what she produces, how perfectly she performs, how pleasing she can be. And for too long, too many have accepted those lies as truth. But God does not speak through the noise of the world. He whispers through identity, not image. He doesn't define a woman by what she wears, how many followers she has, or what season of life she's in. He defines her by who she is to Him, chosen, loved, seen, known, worthy, without needing to earn a thing, without having to compete or compare. She was not made to chase approval. She was made to walk in authority. And that authority doesn't come from the culture. It comes from the Creator. Her worth isn't up for debate. It isn't fragile. It isn't based on the opinions of others or the limitations someone else puts on her. Her worth is anchored in eternity, written into the very fabric of her being, before she took her first breath. And no label from this world can rewrite what God has already spoken. No mistake she's made, no title she's missed, no relationship she's lost can erase the value that was stitched into her soul by the hands of the one who formed her in secret. Before the world could tell her what she's not, God had already called her His. That's the truth that the enemy has always tried to steal, that identity is something we have to earn, that we have to hustle for validation. But God says no. God says you already belong, you already matter, you already carry significance. You don't have to be the loudest voice in the room. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to fit the mold. You are enough because He is enough. And when a woman begins to believe that, when she begins to understand that her identity is not a reflection of culture, but of Christ, everything changes. Her walk changes. Her decisions change. Her peace grows not because the world gets quieter, but because the truth gets louder inside of her. She can walk past opinions and still know who she is. She can walk through rejection and still feel chosen. She can walk through failure and still know she's valuable. That kind of confidence isn't arrogance. It's revelation. It's freedom. And it is dangerous to every lie that ever tried to tell her she wasn't good enough. That's why the enemy fights women so hard. Not because of their weakness, but because of their worth. He tries to cloud their identity because he knows the power they carry once they see it clearly. A woman who knows who she is in God is a force. She is unshakable. She is not moved by trends or titles. She walks with dignity. She speaks with purpose. She lives with intention, not to impress, but to express the image of God written all over her life. When she looks in the mirror and sees beyond the surface, when she sees the soul, the calling, the strength beneath it all, that's when she steps into truth. That's when she begins to live, not as someone trying to fit in, but as someone born to stand out. And this isn't about pride. It's about understanding her original design. It's about returning to the voice that spoke her into existence, the voice that called her very good. That identity doesn't fade with age, doesn't shift with seasons, doesn't vanish in heartbreak. It holds, it anchors. It speaks when all else fails. It reminds her that she is not defined by her past, by her pain, or by people's opinions. She is defined by the God who made her on purpose, for purpose, with every detail filled with divine intention, with a spirit that is more than enough, because it comes from the one who never makes mistakes, who never withdraws his love, who never changes his mind about who she is, even when she forgets, even when she doubts, even when the world tries to convince her otherwise, because deep down in the silence, in the stillness, in the center of her soul, he is still speaking, still calling her his. When a woman walks in faith, she carries something that transcends the physical, something that shifts atmospheres without raising her voice. It is not the faith of convenience or comfort, but the faith forged in fire, the kind that is born in the valleys, in the midnight prayers, in the moments when everything around her says quit, and yet she still believes. This kind of faith is not loud, but it is strong. It does not always come with applause or spotlight, but it carries power that moves heaven. God loves the faith of a woman because it reflects the kind of trust that does not demand to see before believing. It reflects the kind of devotion that stays when it's hard, that surrenders when it's costly, that hopes when it's painful. Her faith is not ornamental. It is foundational. When the world looks for evidence, a woman of faith builds on promise. She walks into rooms full of uncertainty and carries the assurance that God is with her, that he is working, even when the evidence hasn't arrived yet. And she doesn't keep that faith to herself. She pours it into others. She speaks life over dry bones. She prays over children who haven't yet seen the path. She believes for healing in places still broken. This is not blind optimism. It's battle-tested trust. It's the kind of faith that says, even if he doesn't, I know he can. That kind of faith moves the heart of God because it is anchored not in results, but in relationship. Throughout Scripture, we see women who embodied this faith. Hannah, praying through her tears, refusing to give up. Mary saying yes to God without understanding the whole picture. The woman with the issue of blood, pushing through the crowd just to touch the hem of his garment. Their stories are not legends, they are blueprints. They show us what it looks like when a woman refuses to let her situation define her belief. When she lifts her eyes higher. When she chooses to walk by faith and not by sight. That kind of walk becomes a testimony, not only for her, but for those who watch her life unfold. She becomes a living sermon, a vessel of faith in action. Her faith doesn't need a platform. It shows up in how she loves, how she gives, how she waits. It shows up in how she keeps showing up. That's what faith does. It keeps showing up. Not because it's easy, but because it's rooted in something deeper than feeling. Her trust is not fragile. It may tremble, but it does not break. Because she knows the one she trusts, and he has never failed her. Even in the detours, even in the disappointments. Her faith holds because it's not built on circumstances. It's built on the character of God. And that's why God loves the faith of a woman. Because it reflects his own faithfulness. Her belief is often the bridge that brings others to belief. Her prayers become protection. Her intercession becomes intervention. Her hope becomes light in someone else's darkness. There is something sacred about the way a woman believes. She doesn't just trust for herself. She covers others in that trust. She stands in the gap. She lifts burdens she didn't cause. She cries out for breakthroughs she may never benefit from directly. That's the heart of Jesus. That's the heartbeat of heaven. And that's why her faith matters so much. It may go unnoticed by people, but it never goes unnoticed by God. It may not always be celebrated in public, but it is always powerful in the spirit. A woman who walks in faith is a threat to darkness, a vessel for light, a temple for glory. Her prayers echo in eternity. Her worship rises like incense. Her obedience makes room for miracles. And even in silence, her belief speaks volumes. Because faith is not just something she holds. It's something she lives, something she breathes, something she carries like fire in her bones, something that shapes her every step. Not because she always sees the way, but because she knows the one who leads the way. And in that knowing, she walks boldly, tenderly, faithfully, day after day, season after season, trusting that God is not only with her, but moving through her in ways she may never fully see on this side of eternity, but that heaven is writing down with every faithful step she takes.